We're about to go in depth on 3 prime fishing locations to target bass at in the winter period, guys. We're about to go in depth on these areas. If you're the beginning angler, you struggle with fishing in the winter, or if you're the advanced angler and you want to learn more and be able to go out and expand on your knowledge, welcome to the Fishing Coach YouTube channel. Coachy, welcome to the channel once again. Thank you guys for watching. We're about to go in depth on these 3 areas. I love fishing in the winter. Been fishing in the winter longer than any other season that there is in the season between the winter, summer, fall, springtime, guys. Today I'm actually on the lake, and I have this area we're about to talk about that's right here. That's an area that I've caught fish at, and then I know that I'm going to be able to share to help you guys out. If you're on a highland reservoir like I'm at Lake Washita today, or if you're on a lowland type reservoir, this will relate to you guys, okay? As I'm discussing the 3 areas, guys, you're going to see footage from my YouTube channel of me fishing these from previous videos. It could be videos from just a couple weeks ago or from last winter, okay? And also, guys, on my tackle and information, everything is going to be down in the description. I do have a Fish USA affiliate link. If you use that link on your order, I get 5% of it. And then, guys, on my rods, I know I'm with Level Rods. If you have any questions with it, send me a message on my fishing Facebook page. I appreciate you guys that have sent the messages about it. The first area, guys, that I've always had success with fishing in the winter is the back half of creeks. Guys, my whole thought process when targeting these areas was you're fishing for fish that are not just residential, but you have a movement of fish coming in looking to spawn. And the back half of creeks and certain areas of the lake or certain creeks produce a lot of fish moving in there. It's a lot of habitat, a lot of life. And on each lake, like right now I'm at Lake Washita, and this is a back half of a creek, and if you're familiar with Washita, you know where this is at. But guys, for me at Washita, I have some back half of creeks that I will never ever film a video at because of how much success I've had in there, and just kind of, you know, there's that old school kind of fishing part of me that I don't want to share. But for example, let's talk about this creek right here as you're looking at. One thing I like to look at when you're fishing the back half of creeks is the cover that's available. So looking at this creek here, guys, you have this rock on the bank. You have these channel swing in the back. You have a channel swing rock bluff even. That right there is 2 prime targets that way before forward-facing technology or electronics were areas that you could go and cover a lot of water and find them fish that are moving up from the creek ditch up here to the shallower areas. You see that there's some bushes on the water. At times that water gets from the bushes. That's a good area for fish to spawn at. Now, one thing about this creek too, guys, is there's a swimming area, and that swimming area is sand. That's a prime location for fish to spawn in. So for me, on this creek, and each back half of creeks are different. For example, I just did an on-the-water lesson trip with some experienced anglers on their lake. Not going to say the lake. I traveled to their lake in Arkansas. We caught fish in the back half of creek. Now, those fish were relating to bait. This is a type of creek where when bait moves in, a lot of fish from the main lake will kind of follow them too. But so there's residential fish and fish moving in. So the lures I would use typically in the back half of creek scenario, looking at the winter, a jerkbait and a jig were my 2 prime before forward-facing sonar. This is a creek where there's not much wood, so an Alabama rig was another player to cover the water. But looking at this creek, there's a creek ditch that kind of goes through it, and as you get more in the back half of creeks, it's going to get shallower, and then there's going to be flats. And those ledges that drop to the creek, those were areas I always looked at to target besides the fish on the bank, besides your crankbait fish, besides your, like I said, those jerkbait fish. So those on those ditches, I would use a jig, you know, or the Alabama rig. Now, if there's timber, I would use that jerkbait. Like there's one creek here at Washita, there's a lot of timber in the back of the creek. I was using a jerkbait, a deep diving jerkbait, to try to get those fish to come up and eat it, because I really was uncomfortable with throwing an Alabama rig in it. But guys, the back half of creeks is something like in a day like today where we're out here 20-mile-per-hour winds, it's an easy location to fish without getting in the wind as well. So guys, back half of creeks, don't miss out with them on the winter. The next location, guys, now this one for me is more of a feast or famine type of location. The last one was one where like you're going to find fish and there's going to be fish in there to catch. But this one's going to be, it's not much of a structure, but it's going to be relating to structure. So one of the structures it relates to, is I'm going to get into it, could be a main lake point or humps. But what I like to look for, guys, is main river channels that split. Now with that, this also can work in creeks where there's going to be a creek channel and then it's going to split on a point or split on a hump. But for me, on the main lake, I like to look at, and as right now you're going to look at the Google Earth picture of this one point that I wanted to go out there and fish today and show you guys how I'd fish it without live scope and with live scope. But you have a main lake point and that main channel comes by and it splits. And that to me was always a prime location for big fish, and definitely in the winter. Now, before live scope, how I'd fish it was drag a jig out there in deep water. Now, this one here has timber on it, and also I would do the jerk bait more up shallow. Okay, like I say, shallow, my boat's in 30 foot. But now with live scope, what you can do is just go around it and look for the fish and see if they're setting up in the timber, if they're setting up on the outside grass line. If there's grass on this point, this lake has grass. I don't know about your lake, but also you can see then if there are no fish around and not fish, or they could be really, really deep. So a lot of my fish I caught with a jig, you know, when I was fishing a jig a lot growing up, or on the bottom, or the jig was falling through trees and they were suspended and was eating it. But now those fish on the bottom, you can almost see, if you're really good with your eyes, you can target them with forward-facing sonar. We've been using that on my on-the-water lessons. I do the forward-facing offshore electronic lessons and during my guide trips. But that's not easy. But that's one thing now at forward-facing you can see. But looking previously, these locations, when you got bit, it was going to be one of those big, big winter bass. Now, guys, once again, that was 2 of my lures. Now what I'm going to be using is a minnow, a jig head minnow of varieties, depths, and sizes. I'm also going to be using jigging wraps, the jigging spoons for some of them deeper fish as well. So that's going to be kind of my lure choices there. Now, guys, really quick, something I want to share with you guys to help you when you're on the water, like I'm using today, is the Deep Dive app. One thing with the Deep Dive app, it has the locations, the top pattern locations for your lake. What that uses is tournament data. And on this tournament data, what it comes from is from your Bassmaster tournaments, your MLF tournaments, your NPFL tournaments. It puts it all together in a log. And then we have it organized to where then it goes to your lake that you're picking, and it shows the top patterns for that lake that time of year. You'll put in all your information, winter, spring, pre-spawn, your water temperature, does it have grass, not have grass, and it gives you ideas on the patterns. Okay, and so it's pretty cool. This lake today that we're on, guess what it says for a top pattern for the back half of creek in January in this time of year? Post front jig head minnow. So somebody in a winter tournament in the past 2 years, okay, had success in the back half of a creek with a jig head minnow. Now, I'm not telling you guys we're just in the back half of the creek because it's really windy today, but you go to the main lake, it's probably going to show you the lipless crankbait. It's going to show you a jerk bait. It has some tournaments with Alabama rigs from the BF, not BFLs, the FOWs back in the day. So that's just something I want to share with you guys. If you're not, check it out at the Google App Store. Google App Store or your Apple Store. Get the 7-day free trial. And guys, let's go and do the third. Okay, guys, my third location. All right, my third location, which is more with forward facing, guys. Something I've not really targeted until I had live scope. So my first 2 were pre-live scope and with. So now this is with my live scope, but it is drained and middle of kind of creeks. So with the drains, I look for a drain as in a ditch that's between 2 points, or a ditch that comes off of a creek channel into another pocket. And now with forward facing sonar, we can target fish in these drains a lot more easier, I would say, than without forward-facing sonar. You're more efficient is the word. This was always a pattern on lakes with the blueback herrings in the east. Now, on your lowland reservoirs like Texas, you'd fish ditches and fish your drains, but they're shallower. Here on our lakes, we fished the ditches before I did were grass ditches, where you had two grass sides. There's a ditch where there's a transition of rock, and I would be able to throw the jerk bait. You can go jig, whatever kind of bait you kind of want to prefer. But now at forward facing, you can fish these deeper drains. So in the winter, that's now one of my newer areas I target. Now with this, I will say it's been a feast or famine. There are drains and days you find them really in them, and days you will find them. But on our lake, like I'm at today, there's so many of them, and it's like, Jimmy, which one? And that comes from just time on the water and going out and looking. Like there are some areas on this lake where the drains are such more high percentage than other areas. So for you, that's something you'll have to find out when you're on the water. When I'm fishing the drains, I'm very simple on my lures. It's going to be a variety of the jig head minnows. It could be the jigging wrap as well. And also depends on the cover. Like we have a lot of standing timber in our drains, and so I'm fishing around the timber, and so I'm going to have to be pretty, precise with my cast and with my lure selection on that, due to, once again, we're fishing that timber. Okay, guys. So, and I have a few videos that I've done with fishing the drains on the channel, because I'm showing y'all some clips of it right now. But guys, let me know about you on these 3 different types of areas. Okay, so for me, like I said, those first 2 have been 2 that I fished forever, and that third one has kind of been with the advancement of the technology, me changing, doing different stuff when I'm on the water, guys. And this is something that I look for when I go to other lakes. Like if I'm going to Lake Fork, I'm looking at this stuff. If I'm here going to Table Rock, my lakes, Washita Gray, Hamilton, that I fish here and guide on, I'm looking at these 3 prime areas before I look for other stuff, guys. Appreciate you guys. Now let's go to the faith juice segment. Hey everybody, welcome to the faith juice segment, part of today's episode. It's cold outside and it's windy. See my eyes watering here. The wind's kind of hit me. I'm out here working in the boat, about to get ready for a big trip that I kind of have set up with my wife. But guys, I'm going to share some little scripture, and we're going to talk about plans. And you always hear people talk about God having a plan for me, God having a plan for my life, our marriage. God must have planned it this way. And there is scripture talking about God having plans for us and the Lord having plans for our lives. But really, the plan is that, we're here on earth for a bigger picture, and that's to glorify the Lord, live a life for Him. Like I said, we know we're not going to get into, we're not perfect humans, we mess up, but we are here to live and glory Him. But guys, our scripture, Jeremiah 29:11, is a big one you hear about all the time. And there's others. I'm going to share one, here in a little bit. But guys, with that, you might always think that God has you think you might know God's plan, but then you might not. And then something happens and it kind of goes a different way than you thought. But He does know, and He knows that we can handle it. And definitely we can handle it and go through it and go through His plan if we focus on Him and let Him lead us. But there might be things that come up that you might not ever know is part of His plan, but it wasn't part of your plan or my plan. So guys, I have something that kind of came up that I'm not going to share yet, but it's something that I was not ready for and something I wasn't expected for. Kind of came out of there, and but He knows it's part of His plan. It wasn't my plan. It was part of His, and He knows we can overcome it. I want to share it later on the channel, not right now. Don't know how the future is going to be with me and on the Fishing Coach YouTube channel. The fishing, I think we're going to figure it out, is all I'm going to say. But it's something there that's starting to make me think as an whole. Anyway. So guys, let me just share a couple verses real quick, okay? Romans 8:28, we know that all things work together for the good of those who love God, those who are called according to His purpose. Okay, here's another one, Proverbs 16:9. A man's heart plans his way, but the Lord directs his steps. Then I have another one here written down in Psalm 143:10. Teach me to do your will, for you are my God. May your gracious spirit lead me on level ground. So guys, like I mentioned, you might think you have the plan figured out, but there's always something that can happen, come up. How are you going to handle it, and do you understand it is His will? For me, in my situation, it was. We will share more about it later. I'm excited about it, and guys, we'll see you next time on the Fishing Coach YouTube channel.